Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to talk about color grading.
This is going to be a comprehensive review.
My name's Black.
Shut up!
The key to color grading is breaking it into parts. When you talk about color grading, the first thing you need to know is how to color correct. Now, any type of footage, whether you're shooting a vlog, whether it's a professionally shot video, or whether it's a wedding, whatever it is, usually you need to make sure you expose well, you get the white balance well. And once you've done that, while you're shooting, you need to come back and check in your editing suite whether the footage is actually accurate. If it's not, you need to correct it. You need to correct the color, the white balance, the exposure, and that step is called color correcting. That is the first step that needs to be done before color grading. And a lot of people, kind of don't understand this, because to get a good color grade, you have to get a good foundation, and that's what we are going to learn first. We have a 10-second clip that we're going to color grade. Now, like I said before, the first step is going to be a color correction. Now, straight off looking at this clip, you're not going to know whether this is, as if the color is accurate or the foundation is good. So how would you know this? You need to pull up lumetri scopes. When you're color grading, you always have to look at your scopes, simply because, well, your screen, like I'm using a monitor, I have 3 different monitors in my room, all are different brands, different color accuracies, so you really can't trust your eyeballs, because it depends on what screen you're using and what you're looking at, and the light that you're in kind of matters as well. So the first thing I would do is I will go ahead onto and I would enable lumetri scopes. Now, if I haven't got lumetri scopes on, I would go onto window and I would click on lumetri scopes, right? And then even on lumetri scopes, what you want to do is you want to get the parade or the RGB parade, right? Let me hide the waveform for now. Now, this is, once you look at this waveform or the RGB parade, what you're going to notice is the red channel, the green channel, and the blue channel, separately shown, and the levels of the brightness and the saturation of each of those channels is represented in those waveforms, right? So don't mind the tree. So let's take a look at this. Now, if you take a look at these values on these graphs, you'll see that it goes from 0 to 100. Now, 100 is your highlight clipping point, and then 0 is your shadows or the blacks clipping point. If you have it between 100 and 0, that means you don't have any details lost in the shadows or the highlights. That's essentially what it means. Now, the way I do this, there's so many methods to do this. The way I do this is I have an adjustment layer for my color correction, and then I have a separate adjustment layer for the color grade. It's 1 o'clock in the morning and I'm so tired. Right click on the project bin, or just you can either click on this new item tab like thing and then just click on adjustment layer and just hit OK. And I'm just gonna name it by selecting and hitting enter on the keyboard and then saying color correction. All right, so I'm gonna grab that on top of our footage, drag it out. So everything that I'm gonna leave the raw clip untouched, just in case we need to delete stuff. It's a good practice to have. If you want to go back to the raw footage, you just have to delete all the adjustment layers. I'm feeling a little queasy. Why is that? So now that we have the adjustment layer, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you what happens to the parade when we increase exposure and reduce exposure, and I'm gonna show you exactly what it does to the image. So the tool that I use to color grade is obviously the lumetri scope, the lumetri color panel on Premiere Pro. Just in case I didn't mention that before. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at what happens to our RGB parade if I bump up the exposure. Now, as you can see, all the colors just keep going out, and if you after a little while you see all the colors just touching the 100 point on the RGB parade. And as you can see, from the moment it starts touching it, you're gonna lose your image, and almost everything is lost if you keep pushing it forward. Now if you double tap any dial that you change on the lumetri color panel, it just goes back to the original or the default setting. And then if you bring it, or if you underexpose it, now even though you completely bring the exposure meter down, you're going to see that nothing has really touched the zero mark or the zero level. Like none of the colors have gone that low, and it can be seen on the image itself. Like you still can see something, as opposed to when everything was blown out. So if I take the blacks and push it down a little bit further, the whites, and if I just bring everything down, once it starts touching that 0 point, then you're gonna see that you're gonna lose a lot of your image, right? So let me again double click on all the dials and bring everything back to the 0 setting. So when we are color correcting, our goal is to make sure that the reds, the greens, and the blues are on the same level, or they're equally exposed, which means you need to have all these peaks, like the highest green level or the lowest green or red or blue level should be almost the same. Now this is a pretty well exposed image as it is to start off with, because we were in a shadow, like we were in like an area which was, I think it was a massive shed that had a bit of a transparent ceiling, so it was like a massive softbox. So it was well exposed, the image, to start off with. There's no hard shadows on this image, so it's a good start. But if you take a look at these topmost peaks and all these colors, you're going to notice that the blue is slightly higher and the red is slightly lower, and the green is sitting maybe in like a happy medium in between the two. Now how do you correct this? For you to understand the concept of this, or how to correct this, you need to understand what these curves tabs do in your image, right? So if you take a look at the lumetri scopes, and if you take a look at this section between 80 and 100, don't quote me on these values, I'm just giving you a rough idea about where these values lie. If you take a look at the 80 to 100 value, that area is gonna lie on the topmost part of the curve. And if you look at the area between 20 and 0, that's gonna lie between the bottommost section of your curves panel. So if we are to adjust just the blue color in your image, what we need to do is we need to select the blue curves panel, which, as you can see on the lumetri color panel, you have the option to individually edit these 3 colors. So let's go and take a look at the blue color channel for a second now. As I told before, if you want to edit the top part or bring this down a bit, you need to edit the topmost part of the blue curve. So for me, a practice that I adopt is I add 3 points or like 5 points onto my curves whenever I'm adjusting a curve. So technically there is the bottommost value and the topmost value, and then 3 points in between. Just because I can edit them. What happens if I don't have those points? So for example, if I bring down the blue value, see, it's gonna bring the blues down not only on the highlighted area or the top area between the 80 and 100, it's also going to bring down the blues in the mid-tones. So then once you do this, you can just bring this up again, and you have to correct for all the other sections. So it's just easy to start off with adding 3 points in equal distances, right? So now if I bring down my highlights, as you can see, it's only taking blues away from the topmost area. So you don't have to worry about any other area losing too much blues. So now what I would do is I would slightly bring down the blues. Now as I'm bringing down the blues, you're not going to notice anything to your naked eye. but you will notice that, okay, you know what, the peaks are a little equal, right? But we still have a problem where the red is, you know, could be increased a little bit, you know. So let's go to the red channel again, like before, add the 3 sections, and then I'm gonna increase the red ever so slightly. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna increase the highlights, which is again the top part, ever so slightly. So, you know, they're roughly around, I'm eyeballing it by the way, roughly around the same level when it comes to the highlights, right? So if you switch the layer on and off, you're hardly gonna know you're not gonna know a difference to your naked eye, but it's very important when you push the colors later that you have a good foundation. So follow these practices. Now that I have my highlights or the topmost section of the lumetri or the RGB parade more or less equalized, let's take a look at the bottom. Again, if you take a look at these 10, the colors at the bottom, you're going to see the blue color could be darker. So let's go back to the blue tone curve, and then grab the end and then like pull it down a bit. So now we have all 3 colors basically equalized when it comes to the highlights and the shadows. So what we want to do is now we want to make sure that, you know, there's a good color across the entire image, or it's well exposed, which means all the highlights are close to 100 and the blacks and the shadows are closer to 0, but not clipping, but you know, you want to spread the colors evenly throughout these scopes. So your goal always is to equalize the colors, and once the colors are equalized, you want to stretch them so that, you know, there's an evenly exposed image for you to play around once you get to the color grading section. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. So I would overall bring the exposure up a bit. So as you can see, when you bring the exposure up, it like brings everything up, but I don't think the exposure needs to go high that much. So let's take the highlights and push the highlights. Actually, let's take the whites and push the whites up. So as you can see, when you play around with these, each of these control different sections of the RGB parade. So if you ever had a question wondering what's the difference between the highlight and the whites, it's essentially, it's controlling different sections of the RGB parade. So let's grab the whites, bring it up a bit, and then of course you can see the, you know, the blacks need to be a little bit darker, so bring down the blacks. So the blacks, see that you should never clip the blacks. If you look at this right now, if I keep going down, you're going to see that it's touching the 0 value. So don't bring it down that much, just bring it down a little bit. And then let's, you know, I think the highlights are pretty okay, but I could bring down the highlights a little bit more because I want the color to be evenly spaced, and I'll bring down the shadows a bit as well because I want the color to be nicely spread across the entire RGB spectrum. Okay, so let's take a look at, let's switch this off and see what happens. Again, it's not much difference, but what you're going to notice is that it's a little bit more contrasty, and you didn't touch the contrast tab at all. All you did is work on the tone curves, the individual tone curves, and you just, you know, worked on the general exposure dials. You didn't touch the contrast at all, but you added a little bit more contrast, which is this is already a good clip to start off with. So that is the color correction part. So now that you have this is a very, very good foundation for you to continue with the color grading. So now let's move on to that. Again, create another adjustment layer. Hit OK, and then let's name this color grade. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and achieve the teal and orange look, which is, you know, the tropical. That's what a lot of Sri Lankan or people in tropical countries want to do. If you take a look at a lot of travel videos that happen in the tropical regions of the world, you have this teal and orange look, which means the most predominant colors are teal and orange, and they're contrasting colors. Google it if you don't know what contrasting colors are. when you have contrasting colors or prominent contrasting colors, it just makes the image look pleasing to you. But the problem with downloading a teal and orange filter and just slapping it on your image is not that great, because most of the teal and orange filters are made for white skin people. And our skin is already orange, so you don't have to make that more orange. You want to, just figure out what colors around you can be pushed towards teal. And that's how I tackle the teal and orange look, okay? So now that we're done with lumetri scopes, we necessarily don't need it that much. You just need it just to check your skin tones. What I would do now is I would open up the vector scope just to work on the skin tones, and I would just, hide away the RGB panel, because we are not going to color correct anymore. So I'm going to drag the color grade adjustment layer. Again, all I'm going to do is I'm going to work off the lumetri color panel on Premiere Pro. The first thing I'm going to do is I am going to figure out how I can isolate my skin tones, because skin tones are the most important in any image, video, photograph. Your skin tones have to look good. If not, no matter how good everything else looks, if humans look bad, your image is not going to look good at all. So let's go. Now the way I do this is I use the HSL secondary tab, which is, I think, the hue, the saturation, and the luminous is what HSL stands for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a color using the color picker tool thingy, the first one here, and I'm just going to click on my skin tone, and I'm going to select this tick where it says color gray. It just highlights everything that you selected, and whatever you haven't selected just turns to gray. So as you can see, not your entire skin is selected. So what you want to do is you want to play around with the saturation dial to a point where it doesn't, you should realize that it comes to a point where no matter how much you increase it after that, your skin isn't going to get exposed. So then you take a look at the luminance or the luminance values, and then you pull that, and then you're going to see, okay, the rest of your skin appears. So you want to make sure that you find this sweet spot where all your skin is in the image, and same with everything else. Just focus on your skin. So I think this is a good level. And then I'm going to increase the blur a bit. So what the blur does is because you're playing around with pixels and you're selecting pixels, where the pixels meet a different color, there is a hard edge. So what this does is the blurriness feathers that edge where the selected color and the color outside the selected range, the connection between that, it blurs it a bit. So it's like a feathered effect. So I would increase that a tad bit. I wouldn't touch denoise that much. So now that you have that selected, what I would do is I would add a little color into skin tones. Now usually brown people, because at least my skin, because I'm in the sun so much, I could use a little bit more red in my skin. So what I do is I just push it towards the red a bit, a tiny bit. If you take a look at it's like giving a little bit more blood to your skin, and removes that. Now a more accurate way to take a look at this is using the skin tone line, which I use sometimes, but most of the time I just eyeball it. So the way you want to do it is you want to go and select your original layer, or the raw layer, and just mask out your skin, just your skin. Just take a look at so the way I would do this is let me zoom in a bit here. What I would do is I would just take this area of the skin, which is, I think, is a well exposed area, and I would go back to my lumetri scopes just to take a look if my skin tones are lying on the skin tone line. Now if in the vector scope, this line that's going from the left top to the bottom right is called the skin tone line. So whenever you adjust your skin tones, so whenever you adjust your skin tones, you can see if I push it towards the blues, that line is going to move around, and if I push it to the greens, it's just going to move around. So what you want to do is you want to adjust it in such a way where it lands right on the skin tone line. Now obviously the setting that I've given it, or the value that I've given it, seems to be, you know, pretty okay. So this is what you want to always come back to and check. So let me remove the mask for now again. Let's go back to looking at the scopes. Let me reduce the size a bit. So okay, we're done. Now what we want to do is we want to find every blue, green, maybe a little bit of yellow, every color that I can push towards teal. I am going to try and push towards it. Now when I take a look at this, I can see that, you know, my shots are blue color, there's a little bit of green in the background. I want to push all of that towards the teal section, because when you're color grading, you want to keep predominantly only 2 colors in your grade, or at least you want to make only 2 colors prominent. All the other colors you can just maybe either ignore or, you know, suppress it. So let's go and figure out how we can, you know, get the teals out of this image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you know, click on the color grade, go on to the curves tab again. Underneath the curve tones, there is a section called the hue and saturation curves in the Premiere Pro lumetri color tab. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the hue versus hue section here, and I'm going to use the color picker. I'm going to use the color picker, and I'm going to just click on the parts where I want to change. Again, I'm going to click on these sections, the greens. So as you can see, you know, when I clicked on or selected my blues on my shots and the greens in the background, it just selected this area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly double click and remove everything and just put 2 points on either side, and just drag or push everything towards the green area, so it's like a teal. So it's taking all those colors and pushing it towards the teal section. So it's not that much of a big difference, but it just, you know, enhances that. It just makes your skin tone pop a bit, right? Yeah, maybe. So yeah, whatever that looks great, you can push it around. And also remember, you need to know how good your camera is capturing color. If you have a camera that doesn't capture you know, good color depth, it's obviously not going to work. So now that I've adjusted this, let's go and take a look at my skin tones again. So let's go back, click on select the original raw layer, go back to effects controls, click on the pen tool under opacity, and let's go ahead and just, you know, why can't I close the loop? Okay, and then let's go and take a look at the skin tone. Seems to be not bad. So let's just go back to the color grade, just hop back onto the HSL secondary, and maybe just push it a little towards magenta. Okay, let's remove the mask again. Down here, remove the mask, delete, and take a look at. Let's take a look at what happens when I. Oops, sorry. Let's take a look at what happens when I remove the. You can see it just brings more life and color into your skin when you do this. So what do we have so far? We have the blues pushed towards the teal color. We have the greens maybe pushed a little. I could bring the greens a little bit more towards the teal. I think these greens need to be a little bit more teal. So let's go back to the curve and go back to this section here and bring it more to this section. Okay. Okay, so this is without, so as you can see, the greens in the background, once you enable it, goes towards like a teal color. And if you take a look at my shots, once you enable the grade, it goes towards a greenish teal, dark teal look. So you could leave it here, but let's go ahead and make it a little bit more prominent. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go to the color wheels, right? And I want to push the shadows towards teal as well. Now you have to be very careful, because when you're pushing the shadows, you are going to start like affecting the skin tone. Like, let me show what I mean. Like, okay, that's given a teal hue to the shadows. I'm going to grab the shadows tab, and when I pull it down, you're going to see it's not that great. So I'm going to double click and just reset everything. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a little bit of a teal color. I could bring it down, or I could not bring it down for now. Let me add a little bit of contrast in the shadows. And now if you go and take a look at the skin tone on the lumetri scopes, let's go and select the raw file, select the pen tool, and let's take a look at what has happened over here. As you can see, like it has flared out a bit, right? It's not exactly on the line. If you look very carefully, you're gonna see that it has flared out a tiny bit. So if I switch this off, if I go back here and switch this section off, you're gonna see how the skin tone has changed dramatically. This once you add a teal hue to the shadows, this is what it looks like. And once it when I take that hue away, there's a dramatic difference, not to the naked eye, but to the graph. You can see it, which is why you should always follow your graph. So let's enable that back. Let's go back to the HSL secondary. This is where and I'm gonna try and bring that back onto the line. Okay, and let's take a look at the entire image. Let's go back to the raw file and remove the mask, and take a look at that. So it's a little okay, but I still think the shadows are a little too dark. But let's take a look at what we can do. Let's go back to color grade adjustment layer. Let's remove the leaves. Yeah, I could reduce a bit, and I feel like when I look at the overall picture, my skin needs to be a little bit more red. So I'm gonna add a little bit more red to my skin tones, and then I'm gonna increase the level just to make me look a little bit more fair. And that's essentially, I think it's a little too contrast. Give it a little bit more red. Go back to the color wheels. Bring it down a bit. Okay, that is where we are. Now this is what the teal and orange look is supposed to look like for brown skin. So let me show you what it looks like once I take all of these off. So I'll tweak it a little bit more. Like go to basic correction, increase the brightness a tiny bit. Let's go to lumetri scopes, bring the blacks a bit more down. There you have it. That's what it looks like. Now, I'll quickly show you a comparison between the raw image, the color corrected image, and the final grade. So yeah, that's how I do it. Now, what I want you to take away from this video is how I use these tools. Now, obviously I rushed through this just for the purpose of the tutorial, but I tweak these tools a lot more. I spend a lot of time on the color grade, and I tweak these three tools around a lot using the lumetri scopes. Make sure you always use the lumetri scopes. The two things that you need is the vector scope, not the HSL vector scope, but the YUV, I don't know what that stands for, and also the RGB parade. Use those two scopes. Use the lumetri color panel on on Premiere Pro, and within the lumetri color panel, use the basic corrections, obviously, to adjust exposure. Use the tone curves, use the HSL secondary, and use the color wheels that adjust, the color hues of the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. Now, and that's pretty much it. And there you have learned how to color grade your videos. Don't eyeball your color grade. I mean, you could, but whenever you go to different monitors, different screens, different projectors, you're going to realize that, okay, it's not close to what you actually imagined it. But if you use the lumetri scopes, it's going to be the closest it's going to get to what you imagined it to be. Now, before I sign off, I want to show you what happens if you just slap on a filter instead of following this process. Now I have Peter McKinnon's teal and orange filter. I'll put it in here and show you what the image looks like as opposed to what it would look like if you had followed these steps. So now that you've taken a look at what my process is, I want to show you guys what would happen if you just download a filter off the internet that wasn't meant for brown skin. What would happen? And this is what happens in every Sri Lankan video or Sri Lankan travel video, whatever that goes on board. It's just the filter ruins like everybody's skin tone. So let me show you what happens. Again, go to right click on the project bin and adjustment layer. I'm gonna name that filter. This is still recording, so drag that on top. And the way you add a filter is you either can add it at the input LUT or you can go and add it at creatives. I'm gonna go and add it at creatives. So I'm gonna browse, go to the place where I have saved Peter's LUTs, and then select the teal and orange. When you just apply the LUT, it doesn't work. So all you have to do is remember to color correct first. Once you color correct, make sure that you use your lumetri scopes. Make sure that you use the HSL secondary panel within lumetri color to target your skin tones and select your skin tones. It's essentially like a masking technique. And once you have that, try and figure out what colors you want to remove, what colors you want to add using the curves panel, or the curves or the hue versus saturation curves on the lumetri color panel. So that's pretty much it. Follow these steps and I guarantee you, once you get better at it, it's gonna make your footage look a lot better than just slapping a filter on. Okay guys, that's pretty much it. Happy Christmas to anybody who's celebrating it. And that's I guess I'll see you guys in the next one.